Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Support also provided by the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, and the Bill and Shirley Fox Fund for Leadership and Public Affairs Programming at Detroit Public TV.
Welcome to One Detroit. I'm Christy McDonald. A mix of stories and in-depth conversations for you as Nolan, Stephen, and I head out into the city this week. From a new type of development in the city at the corner of Michigan and Trumbull to growing the workforce needed for projects just like it and mixing coffee, laundry, and neighborhood conversation on the east side. It is all coming up. But we're starting at the corner development in Corktown, where Nolan Finley finds Eric Larson, the CEO of the Downtown Detroit Partnership, who's also the developer of this $30 million project. You'll see why its structure is pretty unique out of technology, but also because of the construction workforce.
Hi, I'm Nolan Finley from the Detroit News, here for One Detroit at the legendary corner of Michigan and Trumbull, where Eric Larson of Larson Realty Group is building the city's first prefab apartment complex. Eric, you've called this the corner because this was always the corner when the Tigers played here and when Tiger Stadium sat on this site. Tell us what you're doing here.
Yeah, well, you know, often, Nolan, we've talked about this over the years. It's better to be lucky than good, and being on this hallowed ground is pretty special, and having the opportunity to sort of repurpose what has been a community asset for so many years. I mean, 100 years they played, and it wasn't just the Tigers, it was the Lions. It was a lot of great concerts. Nelson Mandela said his speech here. So what we're doing is we're framing the field. So PAL has restored the original ballpark.
The police athletic leagues on the ball field right next to us.
And what we're doing here on the corner is building 111 apartment units on top of 26,000 square feet of retail at that historic corner of Michigan and Trumbull.
When you talk about sitting in a catbird seat, I mean, you really did fall into it. You started this project, planned this project well before you knew Ford Motor Company was going to be moving into Corktown, just down the street in the old Michigan Central Depot, and bringing all those workers and all that economic activity here. This is the place to be in Detroit right now.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, Corktown is on fire, and being part of that has been very exciting. I mean, the sad thing is I look back and I've been working on this project for 5 years. So yes, we were here and thinking and contemplating what we could do with this site long before Corktown, quite frankly, long before Tony Suave started his project across the street.
Across the street. Everywhere you look here, something's going on, something's being built. But we wanted to talk to you particularly today about the way you're building this project. This is the first prefab apartment unit or complex of any kind in the city of Detroit. These units you see sitting here, they were all built off-site by Champion Homes of Troy, Michigan, a Michigan company, built in a factory, shipped here.
Trucked here.
Trucked here.
Yeah.
Is this just a fancy trailer park, Eric?
Oh, don't go there, Nolan. Yeah, I love you too much for you to go there. We're trying to get away from that stigma, but no, basically it is exactly what manufactured housing has been using for decades. And so it's not necessarily new technology. The systems and the process and the overall sort of streamlining of the building has improved, obviously, over time. The materials have improved. But what we're building is actually a modular unit that is fully finished.
This technology, this prefab technology, has really evolved. I mean, the first house I owned had wheels under it, and now we're seeing basically these might fall into the category of luxury apartments being built in a factory. We've seen prefab communities and in resort communities and other places. What made you think it would work as a low-rise apartment complex?
Yeah, it's a great question, Nolan, because this product has been used quite often in the hospitality world. Yeah. Lots of hotels have been doing it, but as the technology and the ability to build this kind of product has evolved, you now can stack it. They started stacking them 2 high, then 3 high. Now, this is going to be 4 high, but you can continue to build up, which ultimately allows you to create a low to mid-rise building with this technology, which you really weren't sort of focused on doing in the past. It's not so much the evolution of the product, to your point, it arrives on wheels. We just take the wheels off and now have the ability to stack them in the air. So you think about how relevant this is with Detroit and Henry Ford. Yeah. I mean, this is the same production line. And so these houses go down the line, and each station has a specialist. So at one point they're doing the plumbing, one point they're doing the electric, one point they're doing the drywall, one point they're doing the painting. And so it comes off the line, it goes on a trailer, it's trucked here, we store them on a site down on River Rouge on the river, and then they are trucked here.
But I mean, you can see it's painted, outlets are in, carpets in.
And they come with all the flooring, all of the appliances. Yeah. Once they're stacked, the connections are made on site, so there's corridors and all of the connections, so all the wiring and plumbing that's already in these units get connected in, and then we skin the building, the outside of the building. And basically it's done. I mean, that's a little simplified, but...
Cuts down on the amount of time you need an electrician on site or a plumber on site. All the interior work's been done, you just need connection.
It's the fact that you're building the stuff that goes in the air and the base at the same time. That's where your speed comes. You can actually be building the podium that it sits on at the same time you're building this product. You put them both together and it speeds it up.
For a long time, Eric, people really had a view of prefab housing that wasn't very flattering. I mean, we joked about the trailer park at the start of the interview. Has the image changed?
I think the image is changing, and I think projects like this help the image change. And I think the more product like this, the more that people can get out and actually touch and feel the quality of this product, the more people will believe that this is actually an option. It's not, the end all be all, but it is an option to traditional construction.
The other reason for doing this process is the shortage of skilled workers in this region. You need fewer of those skilled workers for a shorter amount of time.
That's correct. And this is a product that, quite frankly, helps sort of bridge that gap. So as we're continuing to really put people to work and train people to get back to work, we also have the ability to deliver to the demand.
Do you expect this construction method to become more common in Detroit?
I hope so. It just is an efficient way to build. It's not for every project, but it's a very efficient way to build.
Well, Eric Larson, we appreciate you showing us around the corner and giving us a look at what's going on the side of the old Tiger Stadium. Thanks.
It's an honor. Thank you. Thank you, Nolan.
That's going to be pretty interesting to watch. Eric touched on the need for more skilled workers for project sites. So Stephen Henderson headed out to Goodwill Industries to meet up with CEO Dan Varner for a look at what's being done to attract and to train more Detroit workers.
Say Goodwill to most people, and they think of the place where they drop old clothes or old furniture they don't need. But Dan Varner, Goodwill CEO, explains that the organization is so much more. It's on the front lines of the push to get more Detroiters ready for work, and they prepare between 9,000 and 10,000 people a year to enter the job market.
So, of course, we do run the iconic thrift stores, which come out of Reverend Edgar Helms' work in Boston years and years and years ago, well over 100 years ago now, that created the thrift store model. But we also, here at Goodwill Industries of Greater Detroit, we're a Tier 1 auto supplier. We run a light assembly and kitting business that serves all of the major manufacturers. And we also run a wholly owned subsidiary called Goodwill's Greenworks that does industrial recycling and asset recovery work for DTE Energy and a bunch of other local companies. So when there's a thunderstorm and the wires come down, we actually take those wires, and if they can be reused, we prepare them for reuse, and if not, we strip them down to their component parts and sell those on the commodity market for DTE.
And the work that Goodwill does is complicated by the real deficits that people bring with them to job training. Goodwill does a lot of work with both returning citizens, those who've been to jail and are coming home, and those who are sent to Goodwill to get training and a job rather than go serve time behind bars. Their challenges are staggering.
I don't know your story, Antonio. How long have you been here?
2013. Actually, November will be 5 years.
Yeah, is that right? Well, congratulations.
Wow.
Yeah. So we
And how did
test
you find
everybody
us?
who we serve, and most of these young men and women are reading at a 4th or 5th grade level and doing math at a 3rd or 4th grade level. And that's kind of regardless of what their actual credential may be. Some of them may have actually graduated from high school, but still are performing at that level. And that's kind of our typical educational attainment level for folks. 99% of them are unbanked, don't have a bank account, never have had a bank account, are not employed. Most of them are homeless or near homeless. So they're literally couch surfing or living out of a car if they happen to have one. Speaking of cars, most of them don't actually have access to a car, much less actually drive one. We're talking about 30% or so max with access to a car or actually driving one. Many were happily getting these resolved now, but with driver responsibility fees and the like, if they did have a license, so that license has been suspended. And the list goes on, like real fundamental challenges to actually getting into the world of work.
Varner is certain about the ways in which the deficits he sees at Goodwill were developed. I sort of want you to think a little bit about the relationship between the work you're doing now with the population you're serving now and the work that you used to do as part of Excellent Schools Detroit, trying to make sure that kids in this city get the educational opportunities that they're supposed to. In my mind, they're not unrelated. This is sort of two ends of the same spectrum.
That's exactly right. I actually tell, when folks say, well, how did you end up at Goodwill? Because my background, I'm an attorney, but my work background really is youth development and then this education policy work. And they say, well, Goodwill, that doesn't really make sense. And I say, no, it's exactly the same. I've been working with the same group of people, for 20 years. I've just followed them from childhood to young adulthood. And the work is very similar. We do education work, and personal development work is a big part of the work that we're doing with the populations that we serve. So it is very similar work. And of course, maybe most plainly, we serve many folks who our education system failed. And when I say our education,
picking up the slack for
that's
something
right.
that wasn't done before.
That's right.
Varner is sure about who's to blame for those failures.
I blame all of us for the failure of our education system collectively. It is a public responsibility. And every person who is watching this show right now, and both of us, are all equally responsible for the mess that we've made of our public education system in this state.
And he is just as sure about the mistakes we have made.
When the state lifted the cap on charter schools, my issue actually with that in hindsight is not that the cap was lifted. It was that it was done so without regard to quality, without regard to performance. We had an opportunity in that moment to actually raise the bar on the performance of our charter schools, which I think in turn would have raised the bar for the performance of all of our schools.
The public schools as well, right.
And I think that was a huge miss, not only because we failed to take advantage of that, but then we did the exact opposite, right? And in many respects actually kind of created this free-for-all situation that has left most schools under-enrolled and so under-financed and far too many seats than we need and so on, kind of just a structural, systemic mess that every school, every teacher, every parent, and every student suffers from. So that's one. There's something around what happened to the city's recreation department in the kind of 80s and 90s that continues to, I think, be a real problem for us as a city.
And you started your work as an adult trying to address that realm at Think Detroit.
Yeah, there's this famous, I don't know how famous it is, there's a study it's famous for me. This is like what kind of got me in this work. A study that was done in the mid-90s that actually was like surveying thousands of Detroiters. I think it was tens of thousands of adults in Detroit about what were the major problems facing the city. Like if you had to tackle, what are the problems you would tackle? In the top 4 was recreation, kids' recreation. Literally, like give our kids something to do.
Thanks to Stephen and Dan Varner. This next story came from a community meeting that we had in the Islandview neighborhood in Detroit, along with our partners at CDAD, which stands for Community Development Advocates of Detroit. Several people talked to us about the concept of neighboring and how connecting with the people they live around makes them feel safer and makes them feel more invested in what's happening on their street and where they live. So where is that neighboring happening? We found it at a new coffee shop and laundromat that also acts as a free community gathering space. On a sunny Friday morning on Detroit's east side, just along Mack near Van Dyke, you can't miss the Commons. Its crisp construction contrasts with the mini-mart and a vacant lot across the street, a subtle sign of change in Islandview on Detroit's east side.
For here to go. For here would be great.
Step inside, you find the bright, steady hum of a neighborhood coffee shop. Behind the counter, Dawn Coffee, yes, she's aptly named, is brewing up her already semi-famous caramel lattes to the neighborhood recycling guys on break, DeQuan Ferguson and Jonathan Maxwell.
It ain't Maxwell House, it's a caramel latte. Can't mess that up. Caramel latte. Caramel latte.
And they make the best lattes over here on the east side.
On the east side, Mac. They are the truth. Starbucks, watch out.
There's a mix of studying students that all new coffee shops with free Wi-Fi and a comfortable vibe attract. That's Milana King with her new baby Violet. She lives just around the corner at Mack and Seneca. Been there for 3 years.
Just every time I come here, I see people I know and all sorts of different people.
Beyond the counter, you realize the Commons isn't just a coffee shop. There are rows of pristine washers and dryers, ready for Marcus Holmes, who stays down the street and came for the first time on this sunny morning with a bag of laundry.
This is nice. Can't get no better than this.
So where did you have to go before to get your laundry done?
Well, I was doing it at the house, but my washing machine is messed up, so I take it on my alley. Or my girlfriend's house.
So you'd have to kind of travel around with it a little bit.
All the time.
The Commons is a new neighborhood spot created by Mack Development, a nonprofit formed just 8 years ago by the Mack Avenue Community Church to improve life in the 48214 zip code. It's a unique start at creating a space, meeting need, and linking a changing community.
We're running a big experiment, if we're honest, and we're taking a risk on behalf of our people and saying, hey, one of the things, we think people really want to come together. They just don't have enough opportunities to do so where everyone can feel welcome.
Ezekiel Harris, or Zeke, is Mack's executive director. He explained how Mack members went door to door in the Islandview neighborhood to ask people what they'd like to see in this space.
Asking people actually, what do you want here? Instead of kind of coming and doing that top-down approach where we tell people what they need. We're like, no. We know in the long run, everything that we do will be more successful based off of talking to people.
And so they said, okay, a coffee shop, that's something that, I mean, everyone can get behind. But then putting in a combination laundromat, but that was really out of need.
Yeah, you know, it was funny because I think there was a bunch of different conversations that were had that led us here to where someone was like, hey, why don't we put them together? And that process, I think, was all based on like, okay, how do we get people together? How do we meet needs of people where they are? And how do we really promote dignity? Because we know, like, specifically around the laundromat, there's not a laundromat within 3 miles of our location. So when we thought about people getting on the bus with their dirty laundry and having to travel, we didn't think that was a very dignified experience. And so we wanted to bring that into the neighborhood to provide that at a high quality location too.
The building, originally bought with $500, ended up with a $1.5 million renovation thanks to fundraising and donations. The grand opening in May, a community celebration and block party that not even the rain could dampen. Free coffee and food trucks, and a varied group of faces that reflect a changing community. But how do you connect people from different backgrounds and different experiences with respect and understanding? Connections with neighbors can make people feel more invested, more a part of where they live, something that Dawn, who lives close by, sees from behind the counter at the Commons.
They socialize. People that would never talk to each other before, they get put in a situation where they sit down and then you see them communicating. And then you hear them say, oh, well, I've lived over here for 30 years. And they're like, well, I've lived over here on this side of Mack for 20-some years. And they've lived 6-7 blocks from each other. They've never met.
So Dawn, explain to me then how that makes a community stronger when you have that kind of connection.
Because if everybody, Detroit is made up of so many pockets. So everyone stays in their own little world. They don't get a chance to find anything out. And you see the people and you're like, oh, they live in an Indian village, they're wealthy, they have it together. And the people from Indian village, like, they're poor, you know, they're trouble, they're gonna bring drama. And then you put them in a space like this and they talk and they get to know each other and you go, wow, oh, you're normal, and well, you're normal too. And then you build a unity.
Building unity, a sense of neighboring or trust doesn't happen quickly or easily.
Do you think that the Commons kind of helps that whole neighboring concept?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because if you have a drive-by conversation with your neighbor and then again see them in a more calmer environment here over a cup of coffee, then you can say, oh, hey, I saw you doing yard work. How's that going? And it's easier to like have a space to start a conversation and spend more time together.
Mac Development is also waiting for the Commons to be a signal for more small businesses to take a chance on Mac Ave. There's already a lot of development coming to Islandview. That makes longtime residents wary. Zeke says the next focus is to work with developers to be in tune with the neighborhood.
That's really important for the residents who are here already, trying to address their needs first versus, okay, what do other people from outside the neighborhood want to see happen here? And so we're really trying to push on developers and saying like, hey, we love that you're here, but we don't want people to be pushed out as a result of what you're doing. Therefore, start having those conversations very early around like, what is my positive impact and what is the negative impact of my development?
It's a lot to consider in Islandview. But as Zeke said, an experiment worth watching for other neighborhoods around the city as well.
I feel good about it. It's bringing it back. Like I said, it's about time. It's about time they bring the Detroit back. I love it. I'm proud of it.
You strengthen a community by bringing everybody together, because you can't expect government officials, you can't expect people to come in and just make something happen. You have to actually say, hey, I live here too, and I want to see something better over here. And it starts with something like this.
You know, we couldn't do stories like these without the support of the Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, which is a project of the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan that's working to increase quality journalism and to help better inform communities. All right, with me now is Sarida Scott, and she's the Executive Director of CDAD. Sarida, it's good to see you.
Thank you, Christy. Great to see you.
You know, you've been back to the Commons, and you had some community meetings there as well.
Yes.
How are they doing?
It's doing wonderful. They're a great example of working with the community to find something that they need that also appeals to a number of people, and a great connector. And the space is beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. It really is neat, and it's bringing in all different kinds of people. And the original idea for this story came from a community meeting that you facilitated with us with Detroit Public Television in the basement of the Church of the Messiah, where people were talking about neighboring. And I know that you go around to a lot of different communities and help facilitate these conversations about what different neighborhoods, what people are thinking about, and what they'd like to see. Are there any similarities that you're seeing in different pockets around the city?
There are. I mean, one of the more common concerns is really about what's happening to our neighborhood in light of all of the development happening in the city of Detroit. And at the one hand, people are excited. People want new development. People want their commercial quarters to come back. On the other hand, there's the fear that they will be pushed out, that the businesses won't address their needs. And again, I just have to say we're hoping that more neighborhoods, more developers, more leadership will kind of take an example of the Commons and recognize that you can have a profitable business that responds to what the current community and residents need.
But does that also come down to some of the organizations? So when you go out to neighbors and neighborhood groups, you say, you know what, you're going to need to do this or do this to make sure that people actually hear your voice. Do people feel that they're being heard?
Exactly, and that's really where CDAD comes in. So CDAD is a membership organization of community development and neighborhood improvement groups. So the block clubs, the CDOs, you're right. And they are there to speak for residents. They are there to help understand what the resident needs are and then to convey them to anyone that wants to come in and do business in the neighborhood. So yes, it's extremely important that we have these connections with the organizations and that they're recognized as being the voice and having the connection to their neighborhoods.
And also connection to maybe some of the work with the city and the city government and seeing how they can tap into the resources there, because it feels like we're hearing so much more about programs that people can tap into, whether it's starting a small business or redeveloping developing a neighborhood block, but they just need to get that kind of information.
You're exactly right. And the City of Detroit, the planning department particularly, I've been really pleased that they are working to do more community engagement. And so just in the Jefferson Chalmers neighborhood, there's a resident and action committee that's working with them on this planning project. And so we need more of that. But you're right. We definitely want the connections between the city and the residents on all of these things that are happening.
And we're starting to see so much change, but I think making sure that people's voices are heard as part of that change and that it's not just happening to where they're living, but they're actually a part of it as well.
Exactly.
All right, Sarida Scott from CDAD. It's so good to see you. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Christy.
All right, we'll see you soon. And that's going to do it for One Detroit. Check us out online and follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. We're there. We will see you next Thursday. Take care.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Support also provided by the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, and the Bill and Shirley Fox Fund for Leadership and Public Affairs Programming at Detroit Public TV.